to every single American. It matters to you, your family, your children, and your grandchildren. My entire career, I have only had one client, the people. And as I stand here today, I am deeply concerned about what I see happening. Because just recently, President Donald Trump made an announcement that should wake every American up. He stood before his supporters, before the press, before the nation, and he laid out what he called a three-way. What to have some protection. Side can't just pass whatever they want if the entire country is split down the middle. Think about that for a moment. He said it himself. The way to do it, the so-called nuclear option, to ditch the upper chamber's filibuster rule. But here's the thing, he didn't just randomly decide to do this. Come in mind. And what legislation is he talking about? He's been very clear about this. He wants voter ID requirements. He wants to ban millions of Americans. He said that if Republicans get rid of the filibuster and pass these voting restriction bills, they will never lose another election. Think about that for a moment. A president is essentially saying, if we make it harder for certain Americans to vote, we will never lose power again. That is a statement about control. That is a statement about power. That is not democracy. That is not the America my mother taught me to believe in. Now, I want to talk about what happens when power becomes the only objective, to simply winning and keeping power at any cost. Because history teaches us something important. When we look at democracies around the world that have failed, that have collapsed into authoritarianism, there's always a pattern. I have spent my entire career looking at the rule of law. I was a prosecutor, and that was my job, to protect the law, to protect people, to stand up for justice and democracy itself. I've seen what happens when the rule of law breaks down. I've seen what happens when people in power think they're above the law. Throughout history, we've seen power over principle, when they prioritize themselves over the people. Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, did exactly this. He dismantled democratic guardrails one step at a time. He made it nearly impossible for his opposition to win power. He eroded voting rights, independence of courts, freedom of press, all in the name of keeping his party in power forever. He did it incrementally. He did it quietly. He did it by making small reasonable at the time, until one day, democracy was gone. And you know what? Trump had lunch with Viktor Orban right before he made this announcement about eliminating the filibuster, right before he laid out his plan to make Republicans never lose again. Admiringly, the president who has spent years destroying his own country's democracy to keep himself in power. That should concern us all. This should concern us all, because the playbook is being written right in front of us. This is not hypothetical. This is not some distant fear. This is happening right now. When a leader says, never lose again, what he's really saying is, never let the people change their minds, never let the people vote in another. When citizens can see dissatisfaction and make a different choice. If one party truly never loses a seat, that's a dictatorship with elections. But here's what I think about when I hear this. I think about the families I've met across this country, the people who are working 2-3 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads, the families who are choosing between paying rent and paying for medication, the parents over how they'll afford childcare while they work, the seniors who are trying to figure out how they'll retire with dignity. These are real people. These are my neighbors. These are Americans. These are the people who deserve leaders who wake up every morning thinking about how to make their lives better, not how to secure power forever. These are the people who deserve a government that's on their side, not against them. And let me tell you what Trump's actual agenda is. Because beneath this never lose again language, there are real consequences for real people, real families, real lives. If the filibuster is eliminated and Trump gets the legislation he wants, here's what could happen. On voting rights, he would be able to pass a national voter ID requirement, making it harder for elderly Americans, young people, and voters of color to cast their ballots. He would ban mail-in voting, making it difficult for working families and people with disabilities to participate in democracy. I'm talking about people who work long hours and can't get to a polling place. I'm talking about elderly people who can't leave their homes. I'm talking about people with disabilities who need accommodations. Mail-in voting gives these Americans the ability to participate in democracy, and he wants to take that away. He's already falsely claimed that mail-in voting is corrupt and riddled with fraud, claims that have been thoroughly debunked by election officials, including Republicans, across this country. But the lie serves a purpose. It justifies the suppression. On health care, he has explicitly stated his intention to means millions of Americans, 24 million people, have been able to get health insurance through the ACA marketplace thanks to these subsidies. Eliminating them would price many of these people out of health care entirely. Seniors would lose affordable coverage. People with pre-existing conditions would be at risk again. Families and food. This isn't abstract. This is life and death. This is whether your mother can afford her diabetes medication. This is whether your child can get treatment for asthma. On environmental protection, his proposals include rolling back protections for clean air and clean water, things that directly affect the health of our children. Our kids deserve to breathe clean air. They deserve to drink clean water. These are not partisan issues. These are human issues. This is what Never Lose Again actually looks like when you read the fine print. It's not about winning elections. It's about power over people. It's about control. Democracy is fragile. It requires constant vigilance. It requires citizens who understand that democracy is not something you win and then keep forever. It's something you have to defend every single day. The beauty of American democracy has always been that when people disagree, and we will always disagree, we have a peaceful way to settle those disagreements. We vote, and the other side doesn't get to say, well, we're never going to lose again, so your vote doesn't matter. That's not what America is supposed to be. That's what happens in countries without democracies. That's what happens in places where freedom has died. The filibuster, for all its imperfections, is one of the mechanisms that keeps the Senate functioning as a deliberative body. It encourages compromise. It ensures that both parties have to work together to pass major legislation. When trying the filibuster, he's not just talking about a parliamentary procedure. He's talking about ending the requirement for bipartisanship. He's talking about enabling his party to pass whatever legislation they want, whenever they want, without any consideration for the millions of Americans differently. That's profound. That's dangerous. And I will tell you something else. Even some Senate Republicans understand this. Majority Leader John Thune has said the filibuster is what defines the Senate. He has said there simply aren't enough votes to eliminate it. Because even Republicans recognize that today you might want to eliminate power, but tomorrow, if the other party is in power, you're going to regret that decision. And you'll have no protection. That's the beautiful thing about democracy. It requires thinking about the long term. It requires recognizing that power changes hands. And when it does, you want there to be guardrails in place. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine a government where one party never loses, where every single law passed reflects only the priorities of that one party, where the other 47 million Americans, or however many citizens voted for the other side, have no voice, no power, no way to protect their rights. Imagine living in that America. That's not freedom, that's domination, that's tyranny. As a woman, as a black woman, as a member of a religious minority, I understand deeply what it means when power is wielded without accountability. Minority groups have relied on the filibuster, on these protections, to prevent their rights from being stripped away. When I was fighting for voting rights, for civil rights, I was fighting against people who had raw power and wanted to use it without restraint. The filibuster saved lives. It protected rights that would have been destroyed otherwise. The freedom to vote is the freedom that unlocks all the others. And when you eliminate the mechanisms that protect voting rights, which is exactly what Trump's three-word plan is designed to do, You're not just talking about elections anymore. You're talking about the foundation of everything else. You're talking about the freedom to love who you love openly and with pride. You're talking about the freedom to worship as you choose or not to worship. You're talking about the freedom to speak your mind freely and honestly. You're talking about the freedom to make decisions about your own future. All of those freedoms depend on a functioning